Greetings and welcome to session 4 of our journey through Paul's letter to the Ephesians. And I want to jump over to chapter 4 now, the beginning of chapter 4, and start getting into a little bit more of the nitty-gritty of what does it mean to be somebody who is a soldier for Jesus, who is actually fighting the battle against the darkness, against the enemy of our souls. What does it mean to do that? What does it mean to be that person? And as we've started to see already, it's very much about the way we live our lives, not exclusively about that, but for all of us, the big picture is that actually as followers of Jesus, we need to be followers of Jesus and lead the life that he calls us to, and that will have the most impact on the world around us. Ephesians 4, verse 1, Paul says, I therefore, a prisoner for the Lord, urge you to walk in a manner worthy of the calling to which you have been called, with all humility and gentleness, with patience, bearing with one another in love, eager to maintain the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. Walk in a manner worthy of the calling to which you have been called. There is a level of life that God expects us to rise up to. Wherever you are in life, the grace of God is solid and sound like a mighty flowing river towards you and is unchanged by anything that you could say or do. So first of all, don't worry about that. But secondly, we are called to walk in a worthy manner. Walk means move. He doesn't say sit in a worthy manner. He says walk in a worthy manner. In other words, you've got to get up and pursue and walk worthily and be a presence carrier, be somebody who will be a church builder and reach out to the world around us. How do we do this? What are the hallmarks of this? How do we know if we're getting this right? Well, there are three little words there straight away that Paul uses: humility, gentleness, patience. Now, when we think about humility, many of us kind of have this, we have this recall of Charles Dickens and Christmas Carol and Mr. Heap, who goes around, he's very, very humble, very humble. And it's all a little bit weird. It's all a bit strange. Humility, we often think, means thinking less of ourselves, means treating ourselves as less, means putting ourselves down, means putting ourselves last in that sense, or at least further down the pecking order. We think it means in some way diminishing ourselves. But true humility means literally this. It's thinking less of ourselves and thinking more of others. Now, when I say thinking less of ourselves, I mean less about ourselves. It's not that we have to think that we're some kind of horrible person or something in order to be humble. Okay, you can think good things about yourself and still be humble. You can say good things about yourself and still be humble, as long as those things are true. But humility has to do with putting others before yourself. So if I am humble, then if we're in the queue at the coffee bar, then I'm going to let you go first, because that's humble. That's humility. I'm not going to push my way in thinking I'm more important, but I'm actually going to say, okay, where my following of Jesus is concerned, you are more important, and so you get to go first. That's only a small thing, and you can imagine 10,000 ways in which you could exercise the same kind of humility in all sorts of different situations. But it just kind of makes the point that being humble means putting others first. Gentleness, Paul talks about, that actually I have, on more than one occasion, sat with couples who have had relationship problems and find myself absolutely dismayed at the way they talk to each other. Now, Sue, my wife, and I, we have occasional arguments and we occasionally fall out over things, and and of course there are times when we might say things that we really shouldn't have said, and we've got to deal with that afterwards. But there is an aggression, a violence sometimes that occurs in the way that people can speak to each other when they're not on the same page, when they're rubbing against each other, when there's friction, when there's tension. And Paul says we're having none of that in the kingdom of God. That actually, alongside this humility, we need to have gentleness, that we need to treat each other with respect, and we need to honor one another. And we do that by speaking kindly to one another and not aggressively. We do that by not assuming things about other people, and not assuming that they're in the wrong, not assuming they did something they shouldn't have done, not assuming that they don't agree with me, not assuming that they have understood the issues. We don't assume any of those things, and we speak to people gently so that we can have a proper conversation that will actually lead to some resolution, some healing, some encouragement. Speak gently to one another, behave gently towards one another. And so we've got humility, we've got gentleness, and we've got patience. And, the common prayer that we've probably all prayed at some time or other, oh, Jesus, give me patience, but please do it now. And, patience, humility, gentleness, patience, these are, in the most part, a choice. Now, we need God to help us, but we have to choose to live like that. We have to choose to be like that. And maybe there are times when we have to remind each other to behave like that. And, I know that sometimes my patience can wear thin. And when my patience wears thin, I'm a little less gentle than I should be. And because, at least I hope most of the time, I am reasonably gentle, when that happens, people can get a little bit shocked and disturbed, dismayed, because the patience has worn thin. And I need people to tell me, well, you're a little bit nudgy there. I don't know if you understand nudgy. Nudgy is kind of, on edge, bit edgy. You're a little bit like that. You just, get a grip. Is there something we need to talk about? I need people to say that to me sometimes, because that's the place that the thinness in my patience takes me to. And I have to talk to myself. I have to address whatever my issue is, and I have to find that place again of being patient. Now, being patient does not mean that if somebody is doing something they really shouldn't do and they keep doing it and keep doing it, you just let them keep doing it because you're being patient. That doesn't mean that at all, but it means that you get alongside people and help them to get on a journey, because you need people alongside you to help you get on the journey. And in doing that, we show patience with each other whilst actually progressing, making the journey. If we're still stuck in the same place, sometimes people do need a kick up the backside. I'm speaking metaphorically here, but you understand what I mean, that they need a shove to get them going. And so there will be times, of course, when it feels like we're not being patient, but actually it's not impatience, it's just what's needed to get things moving. And then in the journey, we are patient with each other when we stumble, when we make mistakes, as long as we're making the journey. And that's the sort of patience, I think, that Paul is wanting us to rise up to. He sums it up in the phrase, bearing with one another in love. That if I love you, then I will bear with you. I will allow for the fact that I'm not perfect and you're not perfect, and there are going to be moments when those imperfections are going to come out, and I'm not going to condemn you because I know that I'm the same. And so we live in a place where we are mutually agreed that we're not going to get everything right all the time. We're not as holy as we should be. We're not as smart as we should be, and we're gonna work together and love one another. We're gonna bear with whatever the issue is. And we're gonna love one another to get to the place where we don't need to bear with that issue anymore, because loving one another, acting and behaving in the right way, has cured the issue, and we can just get on with our lives and go on to the next issue and start off on something else. But bearing with one another in love, it requires humility, it requires gentleness, and it requires patience. And this is really kind of a summing up line in Paul's argument here. Got to bear with one another, got to love one another, because that's really important. And when Paul talks about the body in 1 Corinthians 12, he talks about some parts of the body we're happy to put on display, other parts of the body less so. and that actually it's appropriate sometimes that people in their difficulties are not put on display. We don't make an example of them. And sometimes our love and our gentleness has to be expressed in much deeper ways to them than it does to somebody who's thriving. We've got to pay attention to the people on the fringes. We've got to pay attention to people with problems and struggles that are really difficult to get over. And we can't just kind of sit on a high horse and say, well, you're a follower of Jesus, you should deal with this, and that's that. We've got to find that place of bearing with one another in love and encouraging each other and building each other up. Paul says this. Paul doesn't say this. Who says this? This is from the Expositor's Bible Commentary. Let me read this for you. Paul insists that his readers must continually make every effort to keep on maintaining the unity of the Spirit. Unity, henotes, a word occurring only in this letter, points to a reality that they already possess in Christ. Though they have not created this precious commodity, they must maintain it as a part of their corporate life as a church. Note how insistent Paul is here. He does not view the maintenance of unity as a luxury. Believers must conscientiously and diligently pursue the unity of the Spirit, not the spirit of unity. Now, what does that all mean? I think that's a great exposition from the Expositor's Bible Commentary of what Paul is driving at here when he talks about preserving unity in the bonds of peace. Unity does not mean we agree on everything. So let's nail that one straight away. I have sat in many meetings with leaders from different churches, different denominations, you know, as part of fellowshipping together in a geographical location and you know, occasionally working together for the cause of the gospel. And they believe things that I don't believe, and I believe things that they don't believe. And we are never going to come to a place where we can write down everything we believe and we'll all sign the same document. It's just not going to happen. But it doesn't prevent unity. Unity occurs around purpose, not the small print. If our purpose is to introduce people to Jesus, then I'm happy to work with anybody who wants to introduce people to Jesus. Whether they, you know, believe the same thing about the end times as me or not, whether they believe the same thing about creation as I do or not. You know, there are some important things doctrinally that do bind us together, but please understand that unity is formed best around purpose rather than statements. And of course, you can have a statement of purpose, okay, but not around, you know, fringe doctrinal issues where, you know, actually there are a dozen different potential views, and because you don't agree with me, I'm not going to banish you, okay? Unity is about working together to achieve the purposes of God. And if we are in unity, then we are in a place of peace, because we're working together under the unction of the Holy Spirit to see the purposes of God achieved, and that will be a place of peace for us. Now, I'm not saying easy, I'm not saying without challenges, I'm not saying without its niggles and frustrations, but peace transcends all of those things. And these things are already given to us in Jesus. And Paul is saying you need to preserve those things. In other words, actually, you can lose these things. Your behavior can break these things down. And you really, really, really must not do that. But we must be united around purpose, and we must maintain that place of peace in walking together where none of the niggles and the frustrations or anything else that goes on, you know, are going to affect that unity, affect that peace, and cause it to break down. We need to show love. We need to show respect. We need to help to maintain the individual's dignity. We need to support and encourage, and that's where we need to be. And listen, when I talk about encouragement, I also include a gentle telling off sometimes because of the way people have behaved, and encouraging them through that to behave better. That's also part of the picture. Holding people accountable is part of the picture. But we must do that in such a way that we preserve unity and peace in the church so that we can be effective in the purposes of God. And Paul has this very high on his agenda. He's absolutely determined we will not miss this. And again, if you are looking at kind of the military imagery, if an army is not united, is not going to fight well. If my team, my cohort, is not united, if we don't feel like we are all a part of one another and joined to one another the way Paul describes the body, then I'm not going to fight with confidence, because I don't know if you've got my back. I'm not going to fight with confidence because I don't know if you're going to protect me when I need protecting. And you don't know if I'm going to protect you when you need protecting. And it's always interesting to me the way that works in taking the Roman imagery, that in a shield wall, they would have their shields interlocked and they would have spears, and spears, I'm left-handed, and it would be your job not to spear the bloke in front of you, but to spear the bloke to the right of you who's coming for your mate. Trusting that the guy on your left is going to spear the guy who's in front of you. And that, I like that imagery, because actually, if we're going to preserve unity in the bonds of peace, there's got to be some of that going on. We have to have each other's backs. We have to be looking out for each other. We have to be protecting each other, preserving each other's dignity. We have to be treating each other well, with kindness, and supporting and encouraging. And our focus should be on following Jesus and seeing his purposes achieved and getting there together. So I hope that challenges you. I hope that helps. I'm sure there's a few things to talk about from that, and I'll be back with you next time.